Hello everyone, this is a Ford Territory diesel 2.7 liter engine 2012 SZ. This car had a no boost condition and I wasn't getting any boost and it was in limp mode. I was also getting P0123, I believe that's the correct diagnostic code for it. That was for boost sensor correlation, interestingly enough. So when I looked at the scanner, it showed me that the manifold, I think it's absolute pressure map sensor, that was showing me no boost, but the turbo sensor was showing that it is the turbo actuator position was showing that it is pushing the vane through into the turbo to give maximum boost. So it looked like the computer wasn't able to justify the boost that was claimed by the actuator to see that boost by the manifold pressure sensor. So it generated an error for the boost pressure correlation sensor. So I ended up checking the manifold absolute pressure sensor. It was fine, and after that I moved on to the next logical step to see the turbo. So the thing with this particular car is that there's not much information available on YouTube. Especially I couldn't see any video somebody trying to pull off the turbo, so I had to try it for myself. There wasn't too many variations or versions of the workshop manuals available online, so I had to resort to whatever the best I could get my hands on, and I was able to get some information from Heinz manual. It's not too accurate, that I realized later on. Some of the items that it identifies to pull off does not need to be removed, and some of the items it did not mention at all should be removed to get a better access. So needless to say that I used this information. I went in and tried to remove the turbo. There's not too much space in there, and it took me around 8 to 10 hours to remove the turbo. I was working alone, and after I removed it successfully, I realized that probably this information need to be shared with people who may use it later on, because it is possible to remove the turbo. There's not much space available in there, but if you exactly follow the process that I did, then probably you can save some time. So what I'll be doing now is that I'll try to put the turbo back into the car, which I've already pulled off, and I'll try to record small clips for what steps needs to be done, and then in the end I'll just compile them back in a manner that in a manner that it makes sense to a viewer, in a sequential manner where you'll be able to see from the start to finish steps. So from here on you'll be seeing the videos in a sequential step. So best of luck with your turbo removal. The first step that you need to do is remove the left wheel off, put the car on jacks, and remove the engine cover. Unlike Land Rover Discovery, this removal of the tire does not really help too much in giving you additional access to the turbo from the left, but it will help you slide under the car and remove some of the items and some of the bolts from under the car. So yeah, it's recommended to remove this wheel. Now to start the job, start with disconnecting the battery first, because you're gonna touch the PCM now. So disconnect the battery at both hands to be safe, and then come to the PCM to remove the PCM. This is the first one that you need to take out. There's a tab over here. Just push on the tab and move it to the right. This will come right out. So this first, second, third, and after that you can remove this one. There's also a tab over here. Just push it down and pull it. It will come all the way, and all the cabling you can put it on the left. And after that, just remove these 4 bolts, and the PCM will come right away. Then come to the air cleaner to remove the MAF sensor. There's a tab over here. Just pull it out, this gray one, and then you can actually remove the whole connector. Once it is out, you can there are 4 Torx screws on this air cleaner. Remove them. This thing will come out, but we have to remove this one too. So this band. So once this one out, remove the base of it too. So to remove the base, there are 2 screws, one here and one here. So remove the base of the screws along, so the whole air cleaning assembly should be out, plus this one, and also the pipe that goes from the intake to the bottom, along with another pipe. This goes between the turbo cooler, the intercooler and the charged air hose. So yeah, before the resonator. So you'll see it once you get down to it. You do not really need to remove any of this stuff. I did it because I was doing some testing on this particular hose to see if there was any leak in it or not. But yeah, do not need to remove this, only need to remove this one. Also, the space that it's going to make, you may need it going forward, especially when you are trying to remove this particular hose, which is the compressed or charged air hose. There's a bolt at the bottom which you cannot remove, and you might have to sit down in this area on the top to get to some of the bolts that are back at the top of the turbo and the manifold and the shield and the heat shield, etc. So yeah, making room to work on this car is probably your first and foremost priority. The more room you have, the less problems you are going to have. Now the best thing that you can do is while working on this car, if you really want to remove either the EGR or the turbo, is to make sure that you have enough space. And to get the space, there are a few things you need to remove. You need to remove this PCM tray. There are a few bolts here and there, you can remove them. It's really easy to come off. Then there is this fuel filter. Before touching fuel filter, make sure that your fuel lift pump back in the tank is working. Otherwise, if you put it back, your car may not start. So yeah, there's a whole new chapter on how this high pressure low pressure pump works. But before touching this thing, make sure that your lift pump is working. So remove this pump. You just all have to do is disconnect these pipes. To disconnect these pipes, push them down, squeeze on the tabs and pull them up. So remove all these hoses, take a photo, make sure you do not lose track of what's connected where. After that, all you need to do is just lift it. There's a tab back here, push this tab in and just lift it up. It will come off the bracket. Then there's a water sensor at the bottom, just disconnect it. So you remove this thing, you remove this thing. Then it's best to take the belt off as well. Temporarily take a photo of your routing. Put this, I think it's a 3x8 that goes in there, over there. Pull it up and you can easily slacken the bat and remove it. This will give you enough space over there to maneuver with whatever you are doing. And the last and the best thing would be to drain the coolant off, because you're gonna eventually have to take this pipe off over there. So this pipe off plus the EGR cooler tubes, you have to remove them. So you need to make sure that your system doesn't have any coolant in. And probably the coolant drain on this car is one of the easiest jobs on the car, and does not make any mess if you do it carefully. For example, all you need to do is remove the tray at the bottom here, and once you have tray removed, then on the left side, on the driver's side of the car, this side, you'll have this entry to the coolant. So just plug a suitable size of tube in there if you can, and there is a drain valve at the back. So slowly open the drain valve and loosen the reservoir bottle cap so that it can get air. And once you loosen it, it will slightly start coming down here. If you open, note that if you open this valve at the back too much, then it will start dripping from the back too. So just loosen it enough that you start getting a steady supply of coolant in this tube. Otherwise it will be a mess everywhere. So once you have all these things out of your way, you will have pretty much a very good access to do the rest of the work and complete it. So next step is this small subframe that goes in across. This particular one, there are 4 bolts, 1, 2 and 2 over there. So these are 4 bolts, and these 2 legs are also supporting the fuel lines that goes to the fuel cooler. So just unclip them by pushing the fuel lines upwards. So it's just a clip that's holding it up, just push it upwards, should be okay. So take it out of your way, because this is gonna give you a lot of room in whatever you're trying to do from the bottom. Now with the subframe removed, you can get an idea of how much space do we have here. So when ultimately this turbocharger is removed, you can use this portion to you can use this space to actually drag it out of the way over here. You can, once this one when this catalytic converter it's disengaged, you can slightly push it to the left and get the turbocharger out from here. So let me get up here big. So yeah, this should give you a good idea So this is the space where the turbocharger is going to come out of, and removing this subframe also gives you further advantages of accessing the turbo from the bottom, where plenty of nuts and bolts are in there, which you can use the additional space left by this subframe to remove these bolts. Remove the resonator. So there is a clamp over here and there is a bolt over there. Remove these two bolts and it should come out easily. Now next step is remove this hose. Before removing this hose, make sure that you've drained the coolant, and then there are a couple of bolts over here, one bolt here, one bolt here. Remove these two, and then there is one bolt at the bottom. Remove this one. This is for the intake air to the turbo. Next step is the removal of the EGR valve and the EGR cooler. So to do that, all we need to do is remove a couple of mounting bolts from here to this breather tube, and there is one bolt over here which I've already removed. Apart from that, you need to remove there is that click or type of clamp here. You need to either cut it or remove it. If you have a click or tool, then it can be easily removed. It's accessible. Once you are done there, then you need to remove these two bolts, one this and one this one, these two bolts for this dipstick tube. After removing this, there are a couple of clips at the bottom where the wires are actually clipped to this tube. You remove it and just pull it up. It will loosen it. You don't need to remove it all the way. It can be there till the end of your work. It's just that it has to be loosened so that this thing can come out. Once we have done that, we'll move to the left, and there you'll see three bolts. Let me show you the location of the 3 bolts. You can see one bolt over here, one over there, and one underneath it. So these 3 bolts. Remove these 3 bolts. Once you have removed them, the EGR cooler should be loose and easy to come out. Now this brings us to a very interesting puzzle. The thing is that if we remove these 3 bolts for the EGR valve, so these 3 bolts are this one, the one just underneath here, hold on, yeah, this one, 1, 2, and there's a bolt over here, yeah, this one. The thing is that all these 2 of these bolts, apart from the top bolt, 2 of these bolts are actually hindered by this intake pipe, and it's not easy to come off. I mean, to loosen the bolt or remove the bolt on the clamp that's attached to this, on one end it's here, right? So there's another one just like this one on the other end, which just attached to the turbo intake, and there is no room to get in here. There's literally next to none room to actually reach that particular bolt and loosen it. Forget about any kind of tool putting right next to the bolt. So how do I solve this issue? So in the end, I realized that the best way to do that would be drain your coolant and remove your this coolant pipe that is connecting to the engine assembly. So once you remove it from here, take it out of the way. Now there's plenty of room that you can make. Now you can go, you can move your hand from inside here and reach that particular bolt from the back of the pipe, and that way you'll be able to remove the pipe or at least loosen the pipe. So once it is loosened, you can actually wiggle it out, move a bit to the left, down, and now you have plenty of room to remove those bolts from here. So yes, you can now remove those bolts, remove them totally, and the EGR valve can easily come out. I've seen this problem too many times where people will actually while reinstalling the EGR cooler and valve, they would just not choose not to put 1 or 2 bolts in there because it's not coming loose, they will say, okay, it's good that it's hanging on to the assembly and that's what we need. But no, it's not. You can actually do that. It's easy. And once you have done that, you need to disconnect the cooler lines. One is this one, coolant lines. So one of them connects here and one of them connects here at the bottom. So once all these connections are removed, then you can just wiggle your way and remove this EGR valve along with the assembly out from here. That's the left side. And to remove the top section of the transmission cooling lines, there is a bolt over there that needs to come off, and both the inlet and the return lines, there are 2 clips which are attached to the end of the tubings. So to remove them, these clips need to move forward. Then there are tabs on the side, so they need to be pinched and then pulled back. So that's how it comes off. So once it is off, it can easily be removed, dragged at the bottom, wiggled out, and it should be okay. So next step is the removal of the transmission cooler lines. On the transmission end there is just one 10mm bolt. Just remove it, this bracket will come off, and these 2 can easily be plucked out. Go ahead and remove the exhaust mounting bolts. There are 3 in total. You can see 2 over here, and 1 is accessible easily from the top. And while you're down here, you may want to loosen the clamp pull on the suction pipe. So it's over here. So originally this guy was at the top, I moved it at the bottom. So if it's not accessible from the bottom, you may go ahead and do it from the top. So that's the charged air hose, charged air pipe that we just removed. It's probably one of the most trickiest parts to remove in this whole process. So this nut is really hard to reach, and you cannot just see it from any angle. You just have to feel for it and go for it. So yeah, now that it's out of the way, the next step would be to remove this water hose, this coolant hose. There's a clip over here. Just remove the clip, and also remove the clip from over here. And the coolant by now is already emptied, so we can just simply remove it and put it over here, so that we can actually, this step is actually, the removal of this thing is necessary, because if you want to remove this pipe, the suction air pipe, if you want to remove it, and it has to be removed. So, and it cannot go, this particular pipe, this suction air pipe cannot be removed unless this hose is removed, or the transmission cooler lines in there. These 2 items have to be removed before we can actually wiggle our way to remove this pipe. So next up is this EGR pipe connections. So there are just 2 8mm bolts here and here. Just remove them. Remember, there's a gasket in the middle. Make sure not to lose it unless you want to replace it. Next step is the turbocharger heat shield. The heat shield, this one, it has 2 bolts, one right here and one on the right side. Let me see if I can show you. It's just here on the right. It's really difficult to see, but you can easily feel it. It's an 8mm, so it should be easy to remove. Next step is remove the turbo actuator plug. So this guy is somewhere over here. Yep, that's the one, right next to the turbo. Yeah, hold on, let me focus it. Now next step is removing the turbo oil feed line and the drain pipes. So here's the oil feed line bolt. It's a Torx bit, so you can remove it. And the drain pipe, it's pretty simple. It's really straightforward, just in front of just bottom of the turbo. You can see it, so no need to show that. So next step is removing the bottom bracket for the turbo. There are two parts of the bracket, this one and that one. So it's probably one of the easiest removals in this whole process. For this one, there are clearly 1, 2, and 3 nuts and bolts in here. For this one, there is 2 at the back here, 2 these, and yeah, that should be it. And this is just behind this. It is the oil drain pipe that I was talking about earlier. So it's really easy to access from the bottom. The bolt heads are clearly visible. Similarly, it goes to the side, and one bolt over there. You can easily remove that and remove it out of the way. And now we are up to the last 3 bolts of the turbo intake, exhaust intake. So these bolts are attached between turbo and the exhaust manifold. So on the right of these 3 bolts, you might be able to see another 3 bolts. These are the bolts which I have removed. Haynes manual told me that I need to remove these bolts, but it did not make any difference. So yeah, you do not need to remove those bolts. Just focus on these 3. So 2 are here, and 1 is at the bottom. Let me show you the bottom one. So the bottom bolt of the turbo intake is really tricky to see and locate. Here it is. So that's the bottom one. You just need to lose it and remove the top 2 ones, and you'll be able to pull it out. There's really not much space in here, so yeah, you might want to use your left hand to get into and feel the position of the bolt to remove it. So that's the turbo that came out of the car. I have renewed these 3 studs already on the exhaust intake side, and on the exhaust side I will just put new studs once this turbo goes back into the car. So to remove the turbo and have a better look at the locations of those studs that were really difficult to see from inside the car. So these are the 3 for the intake side, and these 3 are for the exhaust side. Apart from that, there's that banjo bolt, and banjo bolt for the feed line, and for the drain, just like any other turbo, you have these 2 nuts at the bottom. Apart from that, there are some bracket nuts and bolts that needs to go in, which you guys have already seen.